My name is Stefan, and I'm here from the Headland. And you're in the southern part of Iceland. We have about 200 man-made rivers. And most of them are between those two rivers, Loki and the next one called Floki. We have about 120 to 130 of them. And the most that you can find in one place, at least that we know of, is here in this one. We have 12 in total. Both one is a cave which we are not allowed to enter because it's both very small, and one of the very few ones which is still in use by the farmers is this one there below the house. Still used for storaging potatoes and then this weird clear liquid in bottles to make adult people do weird shit. Let me know that. So we're walking through the other three. The first two is right there. Third one is there in the hill, and there we got some fences around some of our other closed cave entrances. Caves that we're hoping to be able to open up again in a few years. It's counted in years and not in months because we have to do everything here in collaboration with this cultural heritage. And everything government related has never really worked fast. That seems to be a global thing. It is a private property, but we still have to work with those guys because the caves fall under historical laws. Unfortunately, we have never had any big university researches or archaeological research done on the caves. Few smaller ones, but not the big ones, and that is because there has not been a lot of interest in the university society to research things that possibly happened before the settlements. Settlement of Nordic Vikings is 874, and most everything points to that those caves might have been here since way before that. Therefore, automatically go to the highest level of protection, and that's why we have only one rule inside the caves, which is that we are not allowed to cut here, like walls or sheets. They're all made out of sandstone. Sandstone is very fragile. We have a lot of carvings, names, dates, drawings, both with new on the walls. So please don't touch that. Also includes moss and greenery and stuff, things that grows around the cave. Now you can take pictures with everything. And if you have any questions about anything, please ask, and I'll try to figure a way out of it. I know a lot of stuff, and the rest of this makeup, and people usually don't hear the difference. It has nothing to do with people not knowing things. We only need confidence on the voice, and people that believe it. It's the same method when you're a politician. Here. Here we go. Second, third one. We know a lot about the uses of the caves from around 1885. Then there's a man called the old Guðmundsson who gets the farm from his father. Same family been here for over 200 years. When he came, he started writing diaries about everything that he was doing. So that's why we know what he was using the caves for his time. When he came, it was used for sheep. It's been used for them for a long time. All up until 1967, so fairly recently. And that's why it has a different shape than the other ones. More of a circular kind of shape due to constant rubbing up against the walls by the sheep. So they made it maybe this much bigger. Or, at the same time erasing most of the carvings that might have had. So if you guys have sheep and caves, it's good to keep it separated. It doesn't really mix well over time. It's the smallest cave and the one that has the lowest entrance. It is extremely popular to hit your forehead on the way inside. Totally optional, not recommendable. So watch your head. If it doesn't catch you on the first one, it usually catches you on the second one, a little bit further in there. So we'll see what happens.
This is taller than it gets, and then on all of them.
At least one.
100. 100.
100? There was a kid with me a few days ago, he didn't have to the sample like 1.5 million. I don't know how the sheep are in his country, don't know. Or bite size somehow. So that is a delicacy in some countries. Yes. Yes, I have learned things on the internet. Tell me things like this. So, there were 70 sheep in here the whole winter. That's why it looks like this. That's why we got almost the height of one sheep, like right here. So they made it at least this much bigger. But long before it's ever a farmhouse, it is most likely one of the oldest living spaces of people in Iceland. Super hard to prove though, because it's hard to prove things that happened like 1500 years ago. But in the year 548, there's a man called Saint Brendan who travels on an Irish skin boat to an island called Thule. Thule, most likely Iceland, like way before Iceland is ever called Iceland. And then people have been arguing if Thule is Iceland, Faroe Islands, Greenland, whatever they find sticking out of the ocean on the way between them. But he travels for 6 days, which is the same time that Vikings later talk about, like years later, when they take the same route after being raiding the British Islands, traveling through the Orkney Islands, Faroe Islands, and then ending up in Iceland. Then all of a sudden Thule doesn't seem to exist anymore, so somewhere along the way it most likely changed names, which is not that far-fetched. Iceland had few names before it was even called Iceland, and Thule most likely the first one. The reason why the man is going to the island to begin with is because he's going to meet an old friend, or a friend of his father. A man that had been in the island for about 60 years. His name was Paul, and Paul lived in a cave in the southern part somewhere. And some people have been researching the stories and throwing around the possibilities of that man possibly living here in this area. Some people going as far as saying that he might have been in some of our caves. The problem is, of course, that we're missing the Paul was here riding on the wall. So it's hard for us to prove it. But there are a few versions of the story that have lasted throughout the centuries. In some of them, there's a talk of a cave that fits perfectly for 1 or 2 people, that has loads and loads of fertile land for sheep, and fresh water full of fish right outside the door. And of those very few caves that fit this description, we got 4 of them in our property, all in line with the river here. So if it was any time anywhere, at least we have a super likely spot. And the river kind of the key in it, because it's not a glacier river like so many of the other ones around. Those rivers, every now and then, they overflow and change paths and do all types of tricks. This one just pops out of the ground in the highlands, doing the same things we've been doing for thousands of years. But how likely is it that Thule and Iceland are actually the same islands? 795 are 2 guys, Irish guys, telling us about their time in Thule, and say when we were young and working, we used to spend our summers working in that island. And in Thule in the summertime, you have multiple days and multiple nights with constant daylight. It is so bright at the night you can pick the bugs out of her shirt before you go to sleep. An Icelandic midsummer, possibly. And the first time we ever heard about the island, like way before we ever thought, 325 before Christ. A man called Pytheas is leading an expedition around the British Islands, has a crew of about 30 guys. They're looking for people to do business, trade with, map out coastlines and things like that. Please stop touching this. Oh, thank you. Somewhere there, they're told of an island that lies in a 6-day trip to the north. There's nothing but darkness for 6 months, and then nothing but daylight for another 6. Of course, they're going to check it out. They're going to take land in the south coast somewhere. They're unable to do it though, because on the coastline is this great giant, and he throws lava rocks and firestones at his boat, protecting him. Not that I'm gonna rule out any giants, like we got all types of weird things in Iceland. We got giants and trolls and monsters and elves and mother-in-laws and ghosts. And sometimes they're the same thing even. But we also got a bunch of volcanoes, and once you've never encountered an active one, it probably sounds and looks fairly supernatural, probably easily mistaken as a giant. So they decide not to fight the giant. Fairly good decision. I don't know anyone who ever really fought a volcano and lived to tell a tale of it at least. So, but knowing that we had 30 guys on this boat, it 100% crossed someone's mind. Somebody definitely nicked his friend and like, dude, we could take him. With 30. Like, we got weapons and shit. And then someone probably nicked him and like, yeah, you know, but like, he got fired, so. We're on a wooden boat. So like, maybe next time. So no one really knows if they were ever able to set foot on land or if they just went home with a lot of stories, but at least they did that. And therefore there's a knowledge of an island that sounds a lot like Iceland way before we ever thought. There are no volcanoes in the Faroe Islands, and there's nothing in the coastline of Greenland, so it kind of leaves this wonder in between. Behind you guys there, we then have a well, a water well. It's about 5 meters into the ground, about 15 feet, same height as we have on the river. And this used to be a fully functional well with a pool of water in it all up until July 2022. Then in about a day and a half-ish, just completely dried up for the first time in years. At the same time, we had days and days of constant rain. So I found it pretty weird, so I went talking to the old people, because old people usually know shit.
Yeah.
And usually don't miss an opportunity to tell you what to do either. So I met 3 different Icelandic older farmers, local guys that know everything, notice everything, told them what had happened and asked them what they found, and all of them were just like, dude, just chill out, man. It's no big deal. It's all happened before, we just probably got an eruption coming or whatever, so. Good as answer as any, but how do you know that? And they said when something is building pressure in the mountains, groundwater gets sucked away somehow by nature, and when the pressure is off, the water comes back. I am no scientist. I have no idea if it's a scientifically proven thing, or if it's more like a farmer's folklore, it's like knowledge of being around the nature and just knowing stuff. What has happened though, multiple times, is that local knowledge and folklore like this have very often outranked even the top scientists, so it could very well be connected. And it is a known thing close to some of the volcanoes in the area, that some of them start to dry up, smaller rivers and streams around them, like right before an eruption. So that's why they say that this could be like a longer indicator of something happening over a long period of time, being further away and all. So next time you hear something exploding in the southern part of Iceland, you heard it first here. And then you know we probably got water. We'll see what happens. All of them have chimneys. This one is in the original size. This one is so close to us we can still see original tool marks. Those little notches and lines inside the stone itself, stone then stacked on top all the way to the surface, and then they're all just straight at ground levels. We never really noticed them from the outside until they're in them. That's why we got plexiglass on top. We kind of had to, like every morning somebody was lying here. Either drag him out, throw him in the river. It's a lot of work. Yeah, it's like, we're right by the main road, and it's like there's summer, like there's daylight all the time in the summertime. It's hard to sneak with people. It's easier in the winters.
I was gonna say.
Yeah,
Wintertime.
yeah, but then like you can have the ravens and the seagulls and like that. It's easier to close it. And then it was usually people that like didn't want to pay the admission fee anyway, so they didn't even have cash in the pockets. So it was like we just got overwhelmed with like unusable library cards and like Ray bonds that nobody wanted to buy. You know, so then we got the tunnels. They're made by the farmers in 1927 to be able to walk with dry hay between the caves. So they used to be separated before that time. And that is how we access the next one. So once you have checked out what you want to check out on here, feel free to walk through the tunnels.
It's cooler. It's like a cool breeze in here. Much larger now. Store the hay. Loki 417 it says Loki. Nice.
Looked like a man's face at first.
Oh, it's gross. It's all mushrooms and fungi. It's like the stem of one. Don't breathe it in.
It's just moisture,
Yes.
it's just water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is mushrooms.
All right, here we have a bit more space. So this one was all full of mud and dirt in the beginning of the 1900s. And that just what happens to caves if you leave them open until 1913. When they cleared it out, they marked it there. But they were only able to use the half of it because when they came here, they found a chimney, saw it had no roof, unable to fix it, just left it like it was. Built the stone wall, it came from somewhere here, and only used this part. And this was then used as a barn, just filled with hay, up until 67. From 67 to 82, it was filled with potatoes. And in the 70s, they would build this concrete part to be able to drive with smaller tractors and dump potatoes on the brook. That's why you guys stand on the original height back there, and this is then what happens when you use it for about 100 years. It always goes a little bit down, it's the same material everywhere. But before they built the wall, it used to be here. They were wondering the cave has to be a bit longer because the chimneys were usually in the middle of the cave. And in all the debris and all the stuff that had piled up here over the years, they found small tunnels, like this little hole leading into the hill. Did not fit for a full-grown man. Fitted very well for the youngest one of the family, who was a 4-year-old boy. They got a rope around his waist and got shoved in the hole. And got the mission of crawling all the way to the end to figure out how long this was. And while the rope was still moving, the kid was still crawling, and when the rope stopped, they figured, like, he must be in the end, so they marked it 11.5 meters or 35 feet. Dragged the kid out, built this wall, and never thought about it again. Just knew about this space that they were unable to use. Widened the chimney a bit, so it'd be easier to throw hay down in. And kids. When the hay had reached a certain level, the kids would jump in afterwards, land in the hay, and then they would spread it out all evenly here to use all the space. And 2 times in the summer of 23, it happened that I had older ladies here in my tours that had memories of jumping through this exact chimney when they were kids. So it's not that long ago. And then about 8 years ago, we were allowed to take down the wall that used to be here, figure this part out, see if it was in fact as long as they said. So this is a fairly new discovery. And of course we were hoping to find maybe some weapons, valuable jewelry covered skeletons or something. Like how cool would that be? I have never held this like the head of someone, like not attached to anything. I would have it on my shoulder or something. This is Pete. Used to guide those caves back in the 500s. Told me everything I know. But we mainly just found questions with no answers. We found stones like we have in the end, there, a bunch of those flat stones, and we found peat moss. Stuff you dig from the ground, dry it, usually used for fire. Fairly common to find in Iceland, but it's weird to find it in a cave. So somebody dug it out, dried it, brought it in here for later use. But we also found this room here that we had no idea that we had. The kids forgot to take a left turn while we were calling here back in the day. And this room is equipped with those little handholds. Those little holes here on both sides. Marking the ropes and both of them. But we cannot put heavy things in.
Yeah, of course.
So we're probably talking light skins, curtains, something to close it off for some reason. Some people think it's a bedroom. Other people think the whole thing is a religious type of something, like a temple of some sort. It's not really a bedroom because you never really live in the big ones, you live in the small ones because it's easier to heat them up. And it's not really a temple either because there's really nothing spiritual going on in this cave, and it's fairly easy to see where we're not. We have spiritual or religious looking caves. We got those as well, it's just not this one. It is just the most popular category to put stuff in when people are not really sure where to put them elsewhere. Usually when people have unexplained things without hesitation, just like throw them straight into the religious bound. Or aliens. Or religious aliens. But what was happening in the cave originally, we probably get the answers from the stones here. They were found like this. Coming from the wall, after the floor, almost all the way to the chimney. Like those 2 lines of stones, making like some sort of a trough or like something that looked to be like some sort of fireplace or something. Every time you find anything in or around those caves, you have to call those guys from the agency, and they have to come here and be experts and tell us what we're looking at. And I don't know where we would be if we wouldn't have all those experts laying around, like probably everybody running around with no pants on or something. But they came, they looked at this, and they were asked, isn't just some sort of fireplace? It looks like one, it's like right in the middle of everything, it kind of ends in the chimney, and like what else should it be? But they were all like, no, probably not. Why not? Because it's not a Nordic fireplace, they said. Fair enough, but couldn't it be somebody else's? It's not like the Nordic guys invented fire. That thing has been going on for a while. So. And And they said, no, it's not really anybody else's because, nothing really happened in the island before we got Nordic people in it. Which is fairly big of a statement, especially when it's fairly widely known it's not really true. And we know it from our own books. We got a bunch of stuff written from way back in the days, all of those old skin-written books and scripts and stuff, and one of our oldest books is the Book of the Settlements. And it's about when the first Nordic guys come to settle the island. And it begins something on the way. When the first Nordic guys came to settle the island, they actually met people already there. It's right there. First page. Guys that they call Papar. Papar is an Icelandic word for Celtic monks. They leave in one sentence in the book and say they did not want to be with the heathen ones. So they just left. And then apparently they just poofed. Kind of never really mentioned again. But then again, people have been poofing for a long time, like through history of people, for different reasons. But they also talk about that there were flocks of sheep and there were flocks of pigs just roaming around. Somebody brought them. They usually just don't pop out of stones by themselves. And we got no indigenous people in Iceland, so everyone that came here came from somewhere else. But 200 caves are hardly done just by a few monks. They're likely done by a bigger society of people, which is probably already in the island, but for some reason, not mentioned in the sagas. But it's not a Nordic fireplace, that is totally true. They were a bit wider, they were a bit bigger. Most of all, they're found in Nordic houses. Building, for example, made by Vikings, and Vikings never made caves. Never lived in caves and didn't want to live in caves. Didn't know how to build caves. Like, this is not a Nordic knowledge. In their books, the one who lives inside the ground, he's afraid of something. He's hiding. He's weak and he doesn't want to fight. And if you don't want to fight, you're fairly obviously not a Viking. Or at least a extremely crappy one. And if you're going to be a crappy Viking, really quickly you get to be a dead Viking. That weeds out like fairly fast. But they would build their houses usually like on top of hills or somewhere where they would see or be seen, to be prepared. If there was enemy approaching, so they would never really live on the ground. But a guy from the institution took the stones with him, took pictures of him and said like, yeah, don't worry about it, we'll figure it out. We'll call you guys after the weekend or something. And that weekend started about 8 years ago. So any day now. They haven't figured out anything. They're not really figuring out anything anyway. Like this, they would have been done. They would have had something by now. Yeah. They're just rolling around in someone's something somewhere. Not that we know of, but then again, it was open for a long time. So water and wind rode through here for a long time. So even if there was soot or ash or whatnot on the walls, it's long gone. About 3 years ago, though, we got help from Ireland. In Ireland, there are 3,000 caves, made exactly like our caves. So it's really obviously a Celtic knowledge. And in the bigger caves in Ireland, we got the same type of stonework. And an Irish couple that came here to check this out first told us the easiest way to explain it. Just tell everybody it's a barbecue. So here we have the oldest barbecue you've ever seen. It's an amazing piece. Those guys.
Those guys?
Yeah.
That one too?
Yeah, those are markings of some sort. There's another one there. Yeah. But the way it works is that below the chimney, we would have this pretty big circular fireplace, open flames. We would take stones like the smaller ones here, put them inside the fire, heat until it was like red hot, take them out, place them here, somewhere on those stones, and cook on it. So it's more like a stove than actually a barbecue.
Yeah.
Between the stones, not really burning flames, more on the lines of some burnt peat moss or something that works as coal, and makes it easier to control the heat on the stone once the stone has already been heated through in the fire. And if that's the case, we had this huge industrial kitchen here, with all those caves all around us. Could it be the people might have gathered here, cook food? We got the cooking area like right here. We got the storage room right there. That's why they're able to close it so the heat doesn't go all the way into the fresh food. And then in the front part has been widened a bit, so you have more space for people to sit around and eat. So some sort of a community kitchen, town hall, place of gather of some sort. If you look at different stories of different communities, it's always a place of gather somewhere. And it's usually around food. And it's way more sufficient to cook for everybody in one spot and everybody cooking individually in their own houses. To help us a little bit more with it, and the reason why I don't have a roof, is it here looks like we got remains of a chimney. It's like a half circle.
Yeah.
So we got one chimney here, we got one chimney there, most likely one or two somewhere in the middle, that later become the reason why I don't have a roof. A well-built chimney stands for a long time, 150, 200 years, without being touched. Eventually those start to fall from inside itself, and then piece by piece they take the strength out of the whole roof, and eventually everything caves in. It happens when there's no one here, and has been for years, otherwise this would have been maintained. But it becomes the reason why we got no writings on the walls here. Here they're all in the front. Here we just have mud and dirt on the walls. We're not allowed to brush it off. If you start doing that, we might brush away possible writings and might possibly be under it. So this has to fall off by itself, which is the biggest waiting game that I've ever participated in my life, because nothing ever changes in here. Constant 4 degrees Celsius, year round, 39 Fahrenheit, same humidity, same everything, all the time. So if there's anything written under it, it will be discovered by someone who's probably not even born yet, so they'll have something to do in the future. In between inventing 5000G internet, AI toilets, iPhone 6 million, or something. Or the flying cars, which I thought we would have by now. Like all the movies promise flying cars like yesterday.
What's in the barrels?
Whiskey. We got
Shots?
no. We're done. Not that I'm gonna decide who has the most money, but we don't have money for this shit. Like, this is experimental collector's item type of stuff. Floki is the only Icelandic whiskey you can have, 100% Icelandic ingredients. Those are empty. There used to be beer in the 4 barrels. Floki, they make all types of whiskeys. They make thousands of barrels here. You can find them in the hotels or the bars where you're staying. Definitely recommend you try it. If you find something that you like, they got 2 types. They didn't sell all of it at the airport, so if you want to drink something home, they will. And it's 2 degrees, like 1/3 of the price or so. But those particular ones are only here, only those 3 barrels. 1 whole barrel has been sold to some collector around the big world somewhere. 1 will be bottled later this year, and 1 will be bottled when it's fully 7 or 10 years old. There will only be about 350 bottles each en route. So if you ever see Floki Cave Reserve, they came from those barrels. Probably costly for a child or something. So really limited stuff. It's a collector's item type of thing. So yeah, that is what is going on there. One of my favorite writings in this cave is on the wall here. Anybody recognize these type of writings? Yeah, those are Nordic runes. Same things that Nordic people and Vikings would use to write with.
No way.
S-A-L-K-A. Salka. Salka is an Icelandic woman's name, but then I'm told by Irish historian, then pronounced Salka. Later evolved to be Sarah, like first of all times. And then I'm often asked, like, why do they have a possible Celtic name in a possible Celtic cave written in Nordic writings? Since Nordic people didn't live in caves and Celtic people didn't write in Nordic words. We got some sort of a crossover somewhere. But it might be very simple. We know that the Vikings took a lot of Celtic slaves. They took them from Ireland to the British Islands, they brought with them to Iceland. If there's already a Celtic settlement that lives between the rivers when the Nordic guys arrived, they definitely interacted with the people. Whatever those interactions were, if it was fighting, trading, changing knowledge, partying. Raised it a bit too far one night, things got out of hand. Maybe it's as simple as that, or maybe just some Nordic dude picked up a Celtic chick, wrote her name on the wall and suggested her something to be nice. And then something very similar might have happened about 1,000 years later, like right beside you. Age plus Jew. The brain does not develop at all. But then about 100 years ago, there was a man here called Einar Benediktsson. He was like this county sheriff in the area at the time, doing research in our last cave, where he believed that he found those ancient Celtic writings called Ogham or Ogham. They're used in Ireland and British Islands from the 4th to the 9th century. Unfortunately, we lost it over time due to people constantly carving newer things and deeper things on top of the ancient stuff. Recently though, we found possible remains of it. Not much, maybe 1 or 2 letters. I'll show it to you in the other cave. If you want, we can take a minute or two, take some pictures or whatnot in here, and then we walk outside this door to the next cave. I can take pictures for you, want a new Christmas postcards or Tinder profile pics or whatever people are looking for. Everybody looks amazing in caves, nobody needs filters. Use the opportunity, it's not every day.
Is there any more writing up here, or just this is the
No,
most prominent?
there's writings everywhere, it just depends on how old it is.
Okay. Is the Nordic the most old, like the most easiest seen and oldest here?
In this one,
Okay.
yes, yeah. And then again, we can't really date anything down to a specific year because we can't really carbon date anything written on the wall.
Yeah.
Because it's just carved on the stone.
Right.
So it's hard to date with a specific.
Like any other languages, like before the Nordics, that could be identified, possibly?
Yeah, possibly those Celtic writings in the other cave. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Just molded mushrooms. That's just mold on here. This is harmless, regular bacteria. But the mushrooms, every year from like July to like September, there are mushrooms that grow only there in the end, and then eventually they die and they just mold. And then they just grow again next year. So, like we got a lot of stuff carved over things. Like this, for example, we got name from the 50s here, but it's carved over small, like older things. The newer stuff is always deeper. It's done with sharper objects and done with a different intention than the older things. So the old ones are always a little shallower and harder to see.
There's like a Viking face.
Yeah, we got a lot of all types of things everywhere. Some of it is old, some of it is new. Well, you can take a peek while we walk past it. This would be a feasible size maybe for 4 or 5 persons live in. You wouldn't really build anything bigger than you needed because then you also have to heat all of it. Then we peek into number 3, number 6, and walk into this one, number 4. 5 and 7 are closed caves waiting for better days. Number 9 are 2 caves by the river, small ones, probably someone's home originally that are used for lamps by the farmers. And number 8 is under the house on the hill further away. And the only access to it is through the kitchen from inside that house. Unfortunately, not a part of our tours for some reason. But yeah, let's peek into those 2 and walk into the last one. So it's hard to come by a lot of this stuff nowadays because you can't really take it as you could back in the time. And but those that are around the mountains, those are all pathway markers, and they're all protected by historical laws as well, because many of them, or most of them, are hundreds of years old. No one really knows who made them or when they were done. They are all really big. They're so big that they stand out of the snow in the wintertime, and some are so big that you can shelter them yourself behind it where there's bad weather. And some of them are built with this like little peephole, so you can see the direction of the next one. And they can all still be used, so therefore, and they're all part of history. So every 3 or 4 years, like there's a non-profit organization goes and fixes this. Those there are, because of course weather turns it down eventually. But it's called the Baldr in Icelandic, and Baldr comes, I think, from the word vörður, and it means a guard. So it stands guards and guides you through the mountains. But this is our side project and has been since last summer. We were finally allowed to start working on the cave after 2 years of paperwork. We cleared it out and we closed it again, and we got the permission to use it as the farmers did. They used it as a smokehouse for a long time. So they would light fires directly in the cave, and the smoke would go through the chimney into the little smokehouse that used to be above it. The smoke being a fish. And we have now gotten the permission to do it again, as long as we don't alter the heat, which is a tricky shit, dealing with fire. So yeah, it's not like no, don't be warm. It's hard. So that's why we got this voodoo smoker down into the cave. It does really generate a lot of heat. Does really affect the cave. So the smoke goes through the pipe, through the chimney, into the ground and into this house there, and that's where magic happens. That's our smokehouse. So it's cold smoke. So there's no heat in the house. The heat is in the smoker. The smoke is in the house. So it's cold when it reaches the chamber. It takes a long time, over 30 days, for the whole process to be done. For 10 days you put meat and salt, frozen, and while it thaws, it draws the salt all the way into the bone. We hang it in the house. We light fires every day for 7 days, rest it for 4, light fires for another 7, rest it for another 4, and then it's ready to eat straight from the house. There's no further process or anything. It's still raw, but it's edible because it's smoked, and it was and is a method to get the longer lifespan of the food. So it was either fermenting thing or smoking stuffs back in the day, and the smoking things comes with the side benefit of tasting awesome.
Yeah.
And
true.
yeah, you can try it. Some of we those little packages we have in the freezer back in the reception.
Really?
Those are lamb meat from this production here. Little like yeah, there's little like tasting packages. We sell them down in the reception. It's really good. Highly recommend you guys to eat it. Try it. And this crazy good smell you're smelling from inside the cave, it's of what we throw in the smoker, what we light on fire. What do you think it is? It's our fuel, what we put in the smoker. Yes, it is. Sheep shit. Dried sheep shit. Yeah, that is what we smoke you with. So you can also, like, speaking of the whiskey, you can find smoked Floki whiskey with smoking the same method. They smoke the barley with this method before it becomes the whiskey. Bet you didn't think it smelled so good. Don't light your own turd though. But you can find it in any supermarket. Speaking of old things, those are train tracks. How many trains have you seen in Iceland so far?
None.
Yeah, that is because they're not here. So they're not missing anything, they just don't do. We already got some sort of a public bus transportation system, but nobody wants to be a part of either. So totally need trains on top of that. But we had a train one time. We went from a place called Distillery in Reykjavik to the Reykjavik harbor. Just hauling stones while we were building them. And the grandfather of the family at the time was working in that construction, and after coming home and getting rid of the Spanish flu in 1918, he dragged those 2 pieces out of his pocket. People apparently had longer pockets. Back in the day, had more stuff to haul around or something. So he let it down there. He built this huge wagon on top of it, filled it with hay, and used to work to feed the cow. And the kids would then use it to fill it up with themselves. Use it as a slide here into the cave. And I sometimes wondered if the holes there on the wall might be leftovers from that party. Some of them fit very well for a face of a kid coming in here like. If you look through old family albums in the farm here, everybody's a little bit dented, but still characters like whatever. But something else used to be here way before the farmers, and the first clues are the 2 chimneys. way higher ceiling, higher than we have in any of the other ones. And all those little places for our candles. Some of them we use, some of them we don't, but they're all carved out by somebody that needed a light. It's not done by the farmers. They did not really need to light up their hay. It's kind of a one-time gig. And the only thing done by us or the farmers is that they laid down the tracks. We will put in the lights, and we had to build those new entrances. Built this one and the one above the second entrance here. Everything else is as it was, from the steps here to the wall there. This part has always been called the chapel. And it's really easy to imagine that at some point we had a church in here. And on occasion we still use it as such when we have wedding ceremonies and things like that in here. They've been hold masses and concerts and all types of gatherings in here. And it's really common to find crosses carved on the walls. All types have been found. Greek ones, Latin ones, Celtic ones. Over 300 in those 200 caves. And then on the wall there, I'll show it to you in a minute, we have the only cross ever found in caves in Iceland believed to be a crucifix. But on the wall here, we might have some of those Celtic writings. See those lines we got here? 1, 2, 3, and then the fourth one goes right through everything, fades down into new or deeper things here. We might have one here, 2 across that. And the reason why I show you this but not some other random something is because here we have somewhere technology. Celtic writings. See the similarities?
Yeah.
Written from the bottom up. So those 4 lines here is the first letter of the word written like this. So really, we're missing everything that used to be below it. Possibly above it, but most likely below it, since we got one here, possibly another one here. Probably talking like 2 separate sentences, separate symbols, some that began somewhere below and went all the way up like this. A few hundred years ago, we probably had everything covered in those writings. Songs, poems, stories. Religious things probably, given that it was a church. Maybe it's the punchline of the world's greatest joke. But then you never hear it again. A lot has been lost to history. So. But it's interesting that all around us in the area, we got Celtic names mixed with Nordic. In mountains, rivers, farms. Farm names in Iceland never change, for example. They're the same all the way from the beginning for the most part. And the name here, Aegir, for a long time we thought it had something to do with the Nordic mythology, because Aegir, like it is in the beginning of the name, is a giant from the Nordic mythology, king of the ocean. The whole name of the farm actually means a place by the ocean. Anybody notice anything missing from this equation while we were walking? Yeah. When you name a farm the place by the ocean, you expect to have maybe the ocean somewhere attached to it, or at least maybe be able to look at it from a bedroom window, something, but you don't. Never did, and the next 3 farms to this one don't even. So it's a fairly far-fetched thing really to connect to the ocean. It turns out that the Irish and the Icelanders have really similar stories of elves. And the elves of the Irish are called Ice. They live in hills called Site. And they're always talked about in the same word and called Ice Site, the same name as we have on the farm. And it means the home of the elves or the home of the holy ones in this old Celtic language. Right outside the door we got one of our most active and famous volcanoes, Hekla. She erupts roughly every 10 to 15 years. She's overdue now for about 13. Hence the well in the first place. And Hekla means the one you should fear. Take it from an underworld guy that's called Hekla from the Celtic mythology. Another one, super powerful, to the east of us under a glacier, Katla, means the one who destroys. Which exactly what she does when she goes off. She melts instantly, millions of tons of glacier ice, flows all through everything, it becomes the biggest river in the world while she's flooding. Bigger than the 4 biggest rivers in the world, all combined into one. To help you guys sleep in that shoulders overdue. Last time in 1918, and roughly every 50 to 100 years. Even though we know that the Vikings had a lot of Celtic slaves, I don't think that they got a day off on Sundays and like ran around and named mountains. So those mountains probably had the names before the Nordic guys came. Not all of them, but some of them. And then we have the DNA of an Icelandic person, 63% Celtic in the women, and 75% Nordic in the men. And the people who do not want to open their mind to the possibility of something possibly happening here before the Vikings, they usually say like, yeah, it's just because they had so many slaves. But they would have to have way, way, way more of them than they actually had, if that would be the only reason why we have this big DNA difference. And then we got the sagas, or stories. where we're told that Iceland was fully populated, that somebody lived all around the whole island in the year 930. If the first guys came in 874 and populated everything, all by themselves, in about 50 years, they must have been extremely busy for a very short period of time. That is some impressive stuff. And on top of all that work, they would then have to do all the fights and battles, build the whole infrastructure of everything around the whole island, and do all the fights and battles in different countries that they still took part in, even though they live in Iceland, and be back to finish all the work here. And it takes a total minimum of 80 to 100 years of populating an island of this size. Not because it's big, it's because it's hard to travel around. So even though everybody was working triple shifts and were like super productive, they're still unable to do all this stuff in this very short period of time, unless somebody was already here. Someone that might explain the DNA, caves, names, someone whose real name was never mentioned in the stories, but someone that easily collides into the Nordic culture, or was made to collide into it, because that is what eventually what happens. The Nordic culture takes over everything, becomes those stories that we tell and are taught and constantly bragging about all the time. Of course, if you had stories like that, you should brag about them. They're extremely cool. And Vikings are extremely cool guys. When you have stories of guys who are able to jump to full height in fully armored clothes with weapons and everything. We're talking guys who are so equipped with their sword it looks like they have three when they only have one. And guys who are so powerful they can make one person into two persons with one blow, clean cut right in the middle, and are equally functionable with bows shooting from right or left hand. When you have stories of power Vikings like this, you should brag about it, because everything is a constant competition. It's like my guy is better than your guy kind of thing. It seems to be a global stuff as well. And I'm not saying that the Viking sagas or the written history of what we know is not true. They're a huge part of our heritage and culture. A lot of them has been proven to us and have been found burial mounds and battlefields and weapons and ornaments and stuff that all lines up with the sagas. I'm just pointing out we're probably missing something from the beginning, like before all the other stuff happened. Maybe nobody wrote it. Maybe someone did and he got tossed to the side for some reason. Maybe it used to be on the walls here and we just haven't found it yet. Until then, those are some of the stories that we tell in the tours. Some of them are written, some of them are not. Some of them are passed down to generations of people. And some of them are extremely unpopular by the university society. They don't really like to rock the boat of the written history, but someone has to do it though, every now and then. Might as well be us.
Rock on.
Of course, we're not allowed to write our names on the walls, but feel free to add your name to our guest book, which is on the outside of our reception house. We got pens and everything down there, so you can write your name or someone else's. No one's really checking. You can fight each other for the smoked meat we got. We got enough of it though, I guess. You can buy all of it. If you want to check out the crosses, they're there. I'll show it to you. You can pet my grandma. She's nice. Just don't feed her. She's on a specific diet. She went a little too far on the Ozempic treatment, but it is what it is. But otherwise, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So we got one here. We got another one here. We got this one, used to be a bit longer at some point. And we got this one here. Feet, legs missing, rest of them here, half a body-ish, and the head here.
Oh, the feet, like you can see the toes almost a little bit.
Like in the beginning, like before 4th century. Then in the 4th century-ish, they become what's called Irish Christian. And they are that until the 9th-ish, when they are overthrown by the Catholic Church, and everything becomes Catholic, and they're not allowed to have the writings no more, and everything should be written in Latin and whatnot. So having both Christian symbols and possibly Celtic writings probably, or could put us in this possible Celtic, Irish Christian time, which is 4th, 9th century stuff.
Yep.
Ish.
So they brought, in that case, they brought the Christianity with them and put the crosses in here.
Yeah,
rather than it coming
but
afterwards.
it is officially decided to be Christian in Iceland in the year 1000.
Yeah.
And it is actually it decided in the parliament. Our parliament is the oldest parliament in the world, established in 930. And it is decided in the year 1000 that that official belief system would be Christianity, but it went really smoothly, and it's really interesting because in most other countries where Christianity was introduced, it was thrust upon people. People had no interest in being part of it, but because it was done with force.
Yeah.
And but in Iceland, probably one of the reasons why it goes so easy or goes so smoothly is because people got to choose. It was not a mandatory thing. It was just said in the parliament, like, guys, officially, we'll be a Christian nation, but you just do whatever you want. You do whatever floats your boat. You can still follow all the Nordic mythology or whatnot. So there's always been a freedom of religion in the island, and still is. You can find whatever you want. Therefore, there had never been a class between those. The closest thing to problems due to anything like this is when we went from Catholic into Lutheranism in 1600 something. But there was not even a conflict there. Or so to speak.
Yeah.
There was not like there was no civil war or nothing. There were guys. There were some priests killed and whatnot. But not really. Like the Catholic Church ends its time with the beheading of the last bishop and his two sons in Skálholt. If you read it from the Catholic Church point of view, it ends with the beheading of the bishop, because Catholic priests apparently didn't have kids, so they don't talk about that part, that he was killed with his two sons. But that he had, but yeah, and also the parliament, and I don't know if this is a common knowledge. The parliament is established in 930, and as far as I know, it is established both by Christian believers and Nordic mythology believers, meaning that the Christianity was already here by someone, and also another reason why it might have gone so smoothly is because that the guys here probably already knew this religion from someone that was already here, probably from the Celts that has already introduced this to them, and they were like, okay, because Vikings, or like, I use the word Viking really freely in those tours. I just use it so people realize what type of people I'm talking about. Vikings, like, I mean, the line between Nordic person and Vikings in today's society, with all those episodes and movies and something, has become really super blurry. Nordic people, I use it really freely in this thing, but Vikings never killed anyone based on the religion until they became Christian. There's nothing in the Nordic mythology that says it's okay to kill someone because he believes in the wrong God. It is your problem to deal with in the day of reckoning, and all of a sudden, like, someone else was up on in the Galilee, like, oh shit, you did exist. Well, we gotta deal with this now. But it says in the Bible, especially then in the Old Testament, that it's okay. And so they were really, when they were at least believed in Nordic mythology, they were really open-minded about other things. They traveled everywhere. They were down in the Middle East. They were here and there, and they figured, like, okay, what do you believe in? Okay, and if they saw something that was nice or whatnot, they implemented it into their own thing. And it's even, some people say that Baldr, one of the gods in the Nordic mythology, is the equivalent of Jesus. Because he is the god of he's just a god of, like, niceness and like he has the same idea as Jesus had of being all kind and all forgiving, and everybody loved him. Everybody of everyone in the realm of Ausgarður, where the gods lived, all loved him because he was such a nice person and a likable dude. Therefore, everything went mental when he then died, because gods also can die in the Nordic mythology. So yeah, it's this belief system thing is interesting stuff, but the Nordic mythology is extremely cool religion. and it's full of stories of everything. There are. It's an interesting thing to see how they explain stuff like things that we don't know. We explain with something that we don't really know either. So, and if you read Snorra Edda, I believe, is where Snorri Sturluson he writes the sagas and the beginning of the world and Heimskringla and everything, like the beginning of the Nordic belief system or how the world began. And there you have like how the mountains became and how the ocean became and what makes earthquakes. The northern lights was the Nordic guys believed them to often to be the Valkyries, like guiding fallen souls to Bifrost, which is the bridge into Ásgarður, to be a part of the team in Valhall. So all of this is explained with their belief system in the time, and it's super interesting to read it.
That's cool. Thank you.
The whole story is an interesting thing. He is killed because of Loki. Loki. So when Baldr was born, his mom went around the whole world, and he asked every living creature, animals, trees, rocks, everything, to spare Baldr for his life, and therefore he was unkillable. And but but once you traveled, there was this tiny tree, like a mistletoe or something, that hadn't really developed, and wasn't really. It was just a kid, so to speak. And we were unable to talk to him. He was really, it was like he was unable to understand the thing here. So, and then the gods did it as a game to throw things at Baldr, because he was unkillable, and so they threw rocks and axes and spears and stuff for as a joke. And there was one guy, I never remember his name.
What?
I think it was called Höður or something. Like he was blind from when he was a kid, and so he never played the game. But Loki says like, dude, I'll help you. I'll let you play. I'll give you a weapon and I'll point you the direction. So he went and made a weapon out of this only piece that could kill him. He gives it to him and he says like, throw that right in front of you. He throws it to Baldr and hits him right in his heart, and he dies. And everything goes mental, of course. Like this super nice dude that didn't do anything to anyone is killed for some fuckery of Loki. Like everything fucks up in his presence. So because he doesn't die in battle, he doesn't go to Valhall, but he goes to Hel, goes to Nilfheimr, where Hel she rules the underworld, by the way, which is the daughter of Loki. And so they try to resurrect him, and Hermóður, which I believe is the god that goes down to discuss this thing. And she said, yeah, no problem, I'll give him back if every creature in the world weeps and are sad of his passing. So every creature everywhere cried due to this thing, except one troll, which is believed to be Loki in disguise because he could shapeshift. So it was his fault all along of everything. But due to this, for this piece, for this doing, they took Loki, they killed his sons, or he has few kids. He has his two kids like who are like looking like humans. He has then Sleipnir, which is the god of Odin, which is the horse of Odin, eight-legged horse, and he gifted him. He has Fenrisúlfur, the wolf. He has the serpent that is around the world, and he has Hel as well. And those three partake in the end of the world in Ragnarök. But he had two others. One was called Narvi. I don't remember the other's name, but the gods turned the one son into a wolf, and the wolf killed his brother, and then they killed the wolf, and they took the intestines of his son, and they took Loki down to the deepest cave down in the underground somewhere, and they tied him on his hands and feet with the intestines of his kid. And then they took a snake that they put on top of his head, a poisonous snake, and the idea was that the poison would drip on his head and give him pain for eternity. And his wife, she stands and holds this bowl over over his head and catches every drip. But every time she has to go and throw it away, stuff drips on his face. And he's tied like this, and every time he groans in pain and moves the earth, and there's where earthquakes come from.
Awesome.
We don't really know the truth. We can't really estimate. Hey, it's all done by hand. It's possibly made by whale bones, stones, whale bones, and some stuff like that.
But the stone down there soft?
Yeah. It's really soft.
None of the earthquakes, none of that damage is going to be on repair.
No. They're all made in this arch shape, so they're really good. Like, it's the strongest portion really building anything. Sure. But they're also right in the sweet spot of not being too hard, like concrete. So it doesn't really cave in, but it's still soft enough, so it kind of just
It's flex.
Yeah. So it kind of is like kicking a waterbed, and they just like moves a little bit, and then it sits in place. So of course I can't say that it has never happened. Sure. But all in all, they're fairly solid. You might lose the entrances, maybe rebuild some chimneys, but the cave all in all is fairly solid.
What type of stone was it you said?
Sandstone.
It's same. Okay.
And it needs though, and it has the cement in the structure is volcanic ash, and you need an X amount of volcanic ash for this to stand for such a long time. So it's not really volcanic rock, it is though volcanically infused.
So with that, like it being by the ocean, is that kind of implying that volcanic eruptions had basically created more land from here? It used to be by the ocean, like you were saying, this is the farmland by the ocean.
It was probably never. That is the Nordic later explanation of the name, probably.
Oh, okay.
But we definitely had the sea level was closer, but it was not in the time of people.
Okay.
The land, of course, rises when the glaciers go off it.
Yeah.
In the settlement times. So and then also eruptions and floods and stuff builds on the coastline.
Okay.
As well.
Is that a volcanic mountain over there?
This is Hekla. Yeah.
What's it called?
Hekla.
Hekla.
So that's a volcano. That's a volcano, and there in the clouds there is a volcano as well.
Wow. A lot of activity.
Yeah. Statistically, every 12 months, once a year, give or take. But sometimes nothing happens for years, and then we have, like last year, we got 6 or 7 eruptions the same year.
Okay.
26 to 30,000 earthquakes a year, statistically as well. So it's a lot of movement.
Yeah.
The island is so very much alive.
Does everybody have a volcano insurance, basically?
No.
Or lava?
No. There is some sort of a treasure that supposedly take the fall if you lose your house due to a
Natural
thing.
Okay.
It's supposed to cover the cost of rebuilding a new one.
Okay. Interesting. Is there like temporary housing in the meantime too?
Yeah, after, like in those cases that this has happened, people abandon houses due to eruptions or earthquakes or some.
Yeah.
There is usually like house that you can which is put there at the spot at the time.
Yeah, I see.
And sometimes people can buy those houses and put them on the foundations of the old ones.
Ah. Farm that you're talking about? The ocean. And volcano can be seen far in the distance. So there's like 3 of them. And somewhere in the cloud there he said, so I'm gonna get some photos of the horses here with the close-up lens, BRB.